types of people. There's those who are talkers and those who are doers. Often they're both. I think the panelists we're going to have here, you will see, are extremely well qualified to share their insights with you today. And it's led by somebody who plays a role as an ambassador of the Emerging Payments Association. We talked about Barclays earlier being a new member to add to the 110 we currently have. But we have 14 ambassadors who are specialists in their particular field. The one who will be chairing this session, her name is Lana. I've known her for over a decade, and she is an ambassador, and she was Fundingwerk. Is that right? Or Fundingwerk. So please welcome Lana to the stage. Thank you.
Well, back in a day, business as usual was good enough. But in the world we live in today, good enough is not acceptable. Our world today is powered, it's fueled by digitalization, mobilization, augmentation, automation. So the digital became the part of our lives. Digital transformation can be looked at in several ways, but one of the ways is that the digital transformation is the company's investment in people, processes, and technologies to maximize the customer experience throughout the full buying cycle, from awareness part through the purchasing part, through the servicing part afterwards. Digital transformation is all about making a digital customer happy. So today, we have an amazing group of guests who's going to join me here on the stage, who's going to tell you all about their stories, mistakes, and successful stories in their digital transformation journey. So please join me in a warm welcome, our first panel, Digital Transformation, Tool, Not a Target. Great. So let's start from the obvious, from the beginning. And I will ask, actually, all of you to give us a short introduction, starting from Pierre. Mike, please.
My name?
Now we know you.
Now we know. You can try without the mic.
Well, I will start. Good morning. My name is Vladimitr Matouš. I'm coming from Slovakia, representing Tatra Banka. I doubt that many of you heard about this brand, but we are the member of the Raiffeisen Group, and the Raiffeisen Group is presented also here in Serbia. I work there as a Chief Information Officer. I'm a little bit stressing this title because what I can hear actually on this badge, well, this is Chief Innovation Officer. I'm very proud of that new title, but I'm not there yet, I have to admit, but I'm working hard.
Laura?
Hi, so I think I've already introduced myself, Laura Joseph, Director of Digital Products and Propositions at Barclays Bank.
Thank you. Petar?
Hi, my name is Petar Stefanović. I come from Komercijalna Banka, Belgrade, or Combank if it's easier for you. And I'm Executive Director of New Banking Technologies and Retail Banking. So in one hand, the online stuff, and in the other, the offline. Thank you.
Thank you. Shall we swap? Yeah. So in the world of innovation, we can't use a microphone. So I'm Andrew Doukanaris. I'm working for JCB. So before you all start and say, what is somebody from a digging company doing here? I actually work for the 4th largest payment scheme in the world that most of you haven't heard of. So we're Japanese based, but we're a global organization. I head up our sales and marketing division, so that's issuing, acquiring, marcoms, and whatever else my boss decides to give me, and I'm very excited to be here. So Lana, thank you for inviting us.
Thank you. And Pierre?
And my name is Pierre Boscq, and I'm running the retail of SocGen here in Serbia.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you really for coming today. So we did met earlier in the past month, and we went through our initial interviews, we discussed about the digital transformation, but that was only some of the comments that were made were amazing comments, but we couldn't publish all of them. So what I would love to do is, I would actually love to ask Laura to start with, ladies first, to start with the digital transformation in a sense of where does it actually start?
And Lana, as we were discussing this, it's a little bit of a chicken and egg discussion, because to pinpoint where digital transformation starts, it's really hard to kind of go, this is the moment, this is the thing that changes. You can kind of look outward. You could do a Porter's five forces and say, look at the market, and is it customer behaviors, is it competitor behaviors, is it market forces more widely, regulatory environment, or is it actually internal? Is it about having the right culture of innovation within a business to recognize that things are changing, or not even that things are changing, but things may be about to change, and that actually what you want to do as a business is to be on the front foot of that, and to be able to not just embrace the change, but to be the ones who make that change happen. And so what we were talking about was, I guess, the difference between innovation as being a culture or something that you recruit for and you bring in. And it's a really challenging one. I firmly believe it's both. I think you have to have a culture which is focused on customer and focused on being able to change and able to pivot. But then you also need to be really responsive to the market and to understand what's happening out there. And again, back to the customer, and understand customer need, and then move fast to respond to that.
Thank you. And you're talking about the customer, and I would like to hear from Vladimir, how did you start it from the customer, your journey? Did you start from the customer, or rather from trying to digitalize first some of the processes that are at the back end?
Actually, I should say that the promise of our brand towards our customer is that we are the most innovative bank on the Slovak market. But it's difficult to say when this, what we call digital journey started. I might say it started when we introduced as the first bank on Slovakia the internet banking in 90s. I could say that it started when we introduced the digital or biometric signature, or when we built a greenfield operation center somewhere in the eastern part of Slovakia based on the lean principles, and this was for a long time a showcase for a McKinsey company at that time. We started originally maybe rather in the automation of the back office processes, because this was our pain point at that time. This was pain points where the cost and long time to yes or time to disbursement and these things. So this was a beginning maybe for us. But during the history of the bank, we were trying to attract the customers and their attention to our bank through the various front-end systems. We are the first bank on the market with the mobile application. We won plenty of the prizes. So it goes hand in hand, and it depends really what is your pain point you need to deal with at this point of time. Now we understand that towards the customer, the key thing is, let's say, convenience. And we believe that some of our applications, like internet banking, mobile stuff, they are very, let's say, sophisticated, but maybe they are too more complicated these days. So we need to do something about that, and we pay a lot of attention to this these days.
Thank you. And I actually would like to also hear from Petar, looking at this more kind of companies that progress through their digital journey, and I would assume that the Komercijalna Banka locally is more of a start of their digital journey. Where did you start from?
Well, we started basically from the top, in our case. When we came to the bank some year and a half ago, it was astonishing to me how offline the bank it is. And it was basically, well, a cry for action when I saw the queues in front of the branches. I mean, we're a specific bank with 1.2 million customers base, which is something that not many banks in Serbia can really brag about, as I am doing right now. But the fact is that we realized if we want to see ourselves as a top player in 10 years, we have to do something. This is rejuvenation of our client base on one hand, and on the other hand, well, going to the fee business more than the interest income. And we started it some 9 months ago. The first wave is finished, and for us it was a chance to leapfrog, because our bank up to beginning of last year was the follower, which is safe and cozy, but in today's way of working, well, not really practical and not sustainable. So we leapfrog and we continue to do so, and not being a very domestic bank with our own headquarters and, you know, deciding on our own destiny, not having a group, that's a must-have. So, yeah.
Thank you. And Andrew, now looking from the scheme perspective, all these massive, fast changes, changing a customer journey, customer experience, and so on, there is quite an expectations also from schemes to follow, because at the end of every banking activity will end up with some sort of payments, one way or another. So how does a scheme follows all these massive changes in the bank?
Yeah, that's a good question, Lana. And you know, I'd urge everybody, take out your plastic card today, close your eyes and tell me which brand it is, because they all look and feel the same, don't they?
Correct, yeah.
So it's about what Laura said earlier. It's about being a disruptor. It's about being first to do things. And all the schemes will claim, and we've all worked with different schemes over the years, that they were the first to do things. So our digital journey started back 50 years ago, when some very clever person decided, rather than using cash to pay in a New York restaurant, they'd use a card and go back and pay later. So whilst we're all great at saying we started this revolution, it started many, many years before we joined, and we're still playing catch-up. And the catch-up is really driven by new entrants that are forcing us to change. And I don't see it as competition, I see it as complementary. I also see that the customer has way more power today. And the picture that we saw from Barclays, and I was talking to Natasha from Cyprus, some of the branches in Cyprus look like that now. That's how they look, because their innovation is customer service. It's not digital, perhaps. It is still about customer service. So we mustn't forget that digital today should really be business as usual. We shouldn't have people with titles, and I apologize to the people on the panel, that are called digital head of digital. And I use the example, there's nobody at Ford that has the title head of air conditioning button. It's the same thing. It is the service that we provide to customers. And we've had to adapt over the years, and our service has been based around customer service. So we provide, yeah, of course, digital payments. They're just called payments in the past. We've given them a different title because I think we feel the need to recognize that the world has moved more online. There are more things happening. You know, we saw things from Curve this morning. It's great technology, but it's a contactless card that's round. And I don't mean to be disrespectful, but let's be serious. At the back of that payment, there is a scheme and a bank still running things, and that's fundamentally important. So we might not want to see branches looking the same, but the fact is we'll still need somebody to provide that service and that expertise. And what I love about this journey that we're all on is that the newcomers that are coming in are shaking up our world, and that can only be a good thing. You know, we worked somewhere together, Lana, where we had a big poster that said, whatever happened to Kodak?
Yeah.
You know, and let's not become the next Kodak. And there is a good example. If you do not innovate and continue to innovate, you do die.
No, that's true.
So our journey has been, let's make sure that we provide great customer service, which is face-to-face, as well as changing the way we do things to match tomorrow's economy, not today's. Because if you work into today, you're dead.
I can actually safely say, almost, that most of us belong actually to the world when we called fintech or digital, we called an IT, very simple world in information technology. It just a little bit sounds a bit more fancy when you say fintech. But one thing that Laura mentioned is culture. Yes, it's innovation and culture goes together. And what I would like to ask Pierre actually is, how in your bank today that innovation culture overlaps? What do you think it comes first?
First, for us, it was not obvious the link between digital and the culture. We basically felt this Kodak thing, okay, coming, and we said, okay, let's do something. So we started by doing very basic catch-up things. We had a lousy e-banking, so we did a better e-banking, lousy m-banking, did a better. So small initiatives like this. And along the journey, we figured out that the problem was not to give new channels or new tools to our customers, but the problem that we were facing was basically reinventing completely the way people use banks, the way banks build relationship with clients. And so it's a much wider problem than just an IT problem to be solved. And that's where the culture comes. Because, so I don't know if it's because the problem is very complex or because our management team is much less smart than our predecessors. But we just figured out that the 5 or 10 of us would not find a relevant answer to that question of reinventing the customer relationship to banks. And so that's where the whole organization needs to contribute to figuring out. And that's pretty difficult for bankers who have been chosen and educated to follow rules. So that's where this culture change, saying to people who have been basically following rules and doing this pretty well, to tell them, now you have to invent the new rules, that's difficult. And this transition is this cultural transition that we are trying to achieve.
It's sometimes
or
harder.
to start very modestly.
That's true, but then on the other side, there is also a culture of a customer. So we need to teach a customer. And one of the things that's stuck in my head, sometimes it's wrongly used though, or wrongly understood, but Henry Ford said, if the customer asked me if the customer would ask me, if I would ask a customer, what do you want? They would say faster horses. They would never come up with a car. So sometimes you would need to give to a customer something that not necessarily right away knows how to deal with it, and changing and influencing a change of a culture through the innovation. And then when we go back a little bit on the digital transformation and think, okay, so within your experience so far, and we said what started first, what do you think now is in your organizations now it's very important to move on to? So what's that next step? Okay, so we've done our lending, as Laura explained about Barclays. We have cards, they go faster, they now have NFC, they're now round, not plastic, even though we can't stick a finger into an ATM yet. But tomorrow we're going to have a biometric, so this is a MasterCard, this is another credit card like a Visa or JCB, etc. But what is now next step? That seems a little bit too futuristic. So Vladimir, from your perspective, what do you think it's like right now is the thing you're working on, and what are you struggling with?
I mean, in the past, typically when we were designing new products, we designed those on our own because we believe we are the best in the world and we all know what the customer really needs. After that, we realized that this is not really the case sometimes, so we introduced those focus groups and asking the customers, what do you like to have? And typically, if you ask him whether he would like to have some new feature, he say yes, but it's not enough at all. So we are now playing with the method which is called design thinking, which creates very early prototypes on the piece of papers, and you somehow live with the customers. We hired some external agency who is quite experienced with that, and now we are realizing new kind of a credit card for our customers, which was designed in this way. And we believe our sales predictions will be much better than in the past because the customer participated through the whole part of the design of this new product. It should be finished by the end of the year, so I'm very keen on what the success will be. So this is what we are doing these days.
That's perfect. And actually, you just mentioned the right word. It's design thinking. It's actually a terminology that comes since the 90s from Stanford University. It's an amazing way of creating new products. Laura, how much do you engage on that design thinking on Barclays? Do you really go with the design thinking of organizing people's, they tend to organize a group of people completely different in a design thinking way. That's kind of their methodology. Putting a psychiatrist, a biologist, a rocket scientist, a businessman in the same room and try and give them a target to create something brand new. How much Barclays does that?
So it won't surprise you to hear that we use a whole host of different tools to drive how we design new products. But actually, as you just talked there, it made me think, you talked about sort of not giving the customers what they want. And actually, you're absolutely right. Part of what we're trying to do now is to understand customer need. And need is different to want. And we're trying to design services, not products, for customer need. So as an organization, this is really, it's terminology, but it's critical. We're trying to move away from selling products to customers to designing services for customer need. Now, as a bank, that brings a whole world of responsibility because that's about genuinely understanding where our customers are at in their life cycle, what their need is, recognizing the unbanked as well as the banked, recognizing those who are potentially at risk, whether because they have low credit scores, poor history, inability to manage cash. Perhaps some people are sort of at the bottom ends of society in terms of security and comfort. How do we take responsibility to actually proactively, as a bank, using all the different channels, not just digital channels, understand their needs and then build services that support them to help them manage their money better over a long-term period. Now, that's a really different way, I think, as an organization of thinking about our customer base. At the top end of the scale, we look at, I guess, our high net worth customers and think about how do we build services that help them invest more smartly, proactively drive opportunities. I was speaking to a business banking customer recently. He said, look, I sold 3 properties last month and I banked £6 million in my account. And I would have really liked it if I'd had some sort of notification that said, we've just noticed you put £6 million into a sterling account that you hold with us. Would you like us to do something smart with that money whilst you figure out what you do with it? And that's what we're trying to get to. We're trying to build a whole collection of back-end services that look at the data, look at what customers are doing, and then build something that responds to that in a very real-time environment. And I think, to your point, you're absolutely right. It's not about having a digital team and then a business bank or something else. I always say to my team, you've probably been listening, you shouldn't have digital in your title. And I think, I firmly believe in a few years' time we won't. That's a function of being really new in a fairly established industry. But my team they work for a bank. You know, they're not digital. They are Barclays employees, and we have the same responsibility to understanding cost of capital and everything else that the rest of the bank have. And what goes with that then is thinking omni-channel, thinking about the whole customer experience end-to-end, because customers don't just operate in-channel, they operate right across. So I've sort of broken it down and said, right, well, you can break it down into transactional banking. That's the kind of the quick serve stuff. There's moment banking, that's maybe buying a car or getting a mortgage or starting a business. And then there's relationship banking. And the way I see it is different channels work really well for different parts of that. And to me, the digital channel should be about transactional and maybe a bit of the moment piece. And then what we do is we lift pressure off the branch network so that our branch colleagues can really build those relationships and help customers with the difficult things in their life. And bereavement's a great example. Customers don't want to deal with bereavement online. They want to go in and talk to somebody in a branch. And when they go in, they don't want to queue. So how do we build an environment that means that when customers have big life moments, they get that immediate response from a real life human being because all the noisy stuff gets dealt with elsewhere.
So technically, get the customer what he needs. What he doesn't need is queuing. And what he needs is an advice how to deal with his finances. So technically, the banking, I guess you would all agree, is all about 3 things. Pay or be paid, store securely and access cash, and borrow money when you really need it. That's all about banking and products around it, or services. So from the Komercijalna Banka perspective, what just Laura said, how do you deal with your innovation part? So you mentioned you came in, you have 1.5 million customers, you start your digital journey. How your design thinking grouping looks like? How do you design think within your office?
Well, very good question in our case. So what we did is basically we made people get outside of the box. In the past, and this is not exclusively for a bank, but I'm sure most of you coming from traditional banks are working with them. So the product management was all about bank-centric. So we created the product, and this product was perfect in IT sense, in a banker sense, but in a customer sense, well, we were kind of frustrated that customer is not acting in a way that we expect him to be act. So, long story short, we did completely the opposite thing. We started, well, first of all, it was not an IT-driven process. There were huge support, but it was a process driven by business with us. And not even by the functions in the bank, but by their mothers, children, whomever. You ask them, what do you need? Because nobody wants to go, I mean, yeah, this morning I got up and I want to go to a bank and I want to take a loan. That's great. No, I'm taking a loan to get a car or to buy something or whatever. So long story short, we really are being customer-centric, or trying to be as much as we can. And all the things we did were driven by a question, what do I do to make customers' life easier? And I mean, P2P money transfer, yeah, great, but what's the concept of that? I mean, the concept is that, yeah, somebody has to send a gift or money for tuition or whatever to his son 300 kilometers away. We provide that. You need a quick loan, do it over the phone. You need to speak to somebody because this e-banking is super complicated to you. Okay, we have video chat, we have digital branch right now. So it's not about us, it's about the customer. And just I mean, one of the things which I've been hearing on every digital conference that I visit is banks are in trouble. I mean, with all due respect to challengers, I mean, I don't see Barclays being super troubled. I mean, they're catching up, but I don't see them massively running in panic because there are startups coming. So the thing is, there's a room enough for everybody. In our specific case, as Komercijalna Banka, being very offline until some year ago, we don't want to be a digital bank. I mean, first of all, good question, and I agree here. What is digital? I mean, yeah, it's a hype. You ask 5 people, you will get a different answer. We want to be a hybrid bank. So for us, digitalization and the whole process, digital transformation was there to give a better tools to our colleagues. In branches, we want to be hybrid. I mean, I don't know, 20 years in future, branches might be questionable.
But what about those procedures? Those procedures could be clunky, they're not catching up, they can't be real time, and if you want to. There's a lot of regulations around it. So digitalizing all these paper piles, it's really kind of, plus you're sitting on a legacy system that was crunching numbers for the past 30 years. That's good and they're safe. But they don't follow the front end, this Java front end, the mobile application front end. It just can't keep with it. So how do you think that digitalizing that back-end process potentially might not be the response to actually your customer? Because he actually doesn't like that it takes 5 days to get to something. You just make it 2 days shorter, so now it's 3. It's still not a real time.
Yeah, again, unlike UK, which is, well, I would say currently really the leader in that with regulatory part of this whole story, I think the rest of Europe, and not exclusively speaking about this region or Serbia, but really the whole Europe doesn't have such a regulatory follow-up of the technologies and how banks are changing. So, I mean, regulatory bodies of UK exist just to give the sandbox to the banks. And this is great because you really can test things. What we are doing, I mean, the whole transformation, it's not about only what you offer to customers. It's also the internal digital transformation. This is the hard part.
Yeah, that's absolutely. I mean, there's lots of kind of let's put it this way, silently agreed.
Sure.
Or a silent acceptance. I don't like it, but I accept it. And it was an interesting project going on at the moment, Vocalink and MasterCard, etc. There is a UK government is trying to get checks out of the system because it costs a lot. And yes, there will be a lot of still questions they're getting there. So we digitalize the check. How can I print it? Well, why would you print it? Because you already put a digital. So this is the bit that I understand that there is a little bit of an internal education, an internal culture that needs to change. But from Andrew, from your perspective, your customers are banks. I mean, okay, JCB is a three-party as well as a four-party model now with brand collaborations. But how then JCB follows that businesses that are actually chasing the customer? So the customer chases the business chases the customer, the acquirers or issuers, and then you're actually chasing the upgrades of the acquirers and issuers and banks. How that works?
Again, good question. So, I mean, it's very easy to sit here and say we're not very good at what we do, all of us, and banks are in trouble. And you're right, they're not in trouble. They just have more competition than ever before. And some of that competition is non-traditional, but also the customer has a bigger voice, way more than before, because we've made it easier for customers to switch from one bank to another. You know, I'm one of those people. I'm feeling young today because I've taken my tie off. So I've gone fintech today, okay? But I still have the same bank account that I opened in 1983. It's still, I haven't been to the branch. I don't know if it's still there, okay? It probably isn't anymore, but it looks great on the checkbook that I never use, okay? So when I look at what our customers, the banks, and also the merchants have way more power today because, quite rightly so, the system has allowed that to happen. So our customers are saying to us, look, we're facing competition from other banks who are innovating, who are changing. What can you provide as a world leader, as somebody that stretches across the globe? What expertise are you finding? And our role is to provide our associate banks with the expertise that we bring globally. And that's the great thing about what I do, that we can talk about what we did in Serbia 10 years ago, what we did in Australia 5 years ago, and what's happening in Kenya. You know, when M-Pesa was launched, it was way more radical than anything that's happened since. And that was because the customer had a need and a want. And the banks responded to that very quickly. So our role as a scheme, as with the other schemes as well, is to listen to those banks and try and provide greater insight into what's happening. It's very easy to focus on your own market or your own region, but there are some great things happening around the world. And you know, I drive through the fintech hub every morning at Old Street in London. You know, that 20 years ago most people wouldn't drive past, and now it's the innovation centre of Europe, if not the world.
Yeah, it's a D spot in London.
So you see how things change, and we're playing catch up. But what we try to provide is that insight and expertise, because we get to speak to 200-300 banks every week and find out what their issues are, what their concerns are, and we try and marry up those issues with the solutions that we have. And again, the other schemes do the same thing.
Yes.
We just do it our way.
Yes.
So that's what I think our customers, the banks, are looking for. And in terms of the merchants, I still think the merchants have a much bigger voice than we believe they have today. So when I look from a payments perspective, the merchants have way more power. And I think the biggest threat, or the biggest potential threat to what we do as acquirers and issuers, is if the merchants decide to go alone and form their own kind of payment scheme. That could be quite a challenge for us. But what a great opportunity that would be, because again, it makes it sit up and think about what services do we need to provide. And
what's their actual needs.
Yeah, so as a scheme, we've got card members, we've got merchants, we have acquirers, we have issuers. So we're talking to everybody in that payment space, and you learn an awful lot from that.
Exactly, and plus you do have a brand promise towards the actual customer on the street. There is a brand promise, there is an infrastructure built for decades at the back. But then again, with all that infrastructure, with the existence since 1959 and McNamara and a forgotten wallet in a restaurant and creating a diners and the whole industry today, you're sitting on a huge amount of data, so you know quite a lot as a scheme. So all the schemes around, and I would like to ask actually Pierre, how does, going into the big data story, how does the banks use that big data? Do you really use it? How do you use it? Do you think that you do it in the right way?
I know that we are not doing it in the right way. We're just
That's at least honest.
We're just really at the very beginning of this journey of really exploiting the data in order to build a relevant dialogue with our customers. So that I know that you're behaving like this now, and I should say something to you relevant, offer something to you right now. So that's what we are trying to do, but we are at the very beginning. So we're doing it not with big data, we're doing it with small data, and trying to build
give some experience, some response
easy
to the customer.
cases. So what we are working on right now is to, for instance, to offer our customers when they reach the limit on their card, and they're in the restaurant with their wife or not so
Somebody
official
else's
wife, and they swipe the card at the end of the nice romantic dinner, and no funds available. To be able to right away on the mobile say, okay, here is 200 euros, just repay this next week. So that's the kind of thing that we are building. So it doesn't require big data, it requires small data, but slowly we are learning out of this and trying to really do this in a with very little steps. On the operation side and on the what the customers see, and we are working as well on the back end to build infrastructure, build the know-how of managing all this data, which sincerely today we don't have and we need to learn. So we're in a really learning phase.
I hope actually today we're going to hear a lot about the artificial intelligence, machine learning, and something that's going to give a chance to actually process the amount of data, because the amount of data that especially I know from the experience schemes can sit on, it's just an amazing, and what they can tell you about it. And join that with a Google and a GPS, where were you at a certain point in time? Well, you know everything about the customer. But on Vladimir, in your bank, how much do you think you can at today use the data you have, or the data that the schemes can provide, to get to know that customer need and respond as quick as possible?
I mean, we can definitely do a lot, but let's be vocal about the truth. Our issue is to, let's say, find the free capacity resources to deal with these issues. I mean, we are struggling with the regulation as everybody else. I mean, today, 50% of my IT budget for the software projects is for the regulatory projects. All these MiFIDs, IFRS 9s, PSD2s, or whatever. Yeah. It's nightmare. And this is a major difficulty for us as a bank at this point of time, because we have to deal with these regulatory issues. On the other side, we need to do the projects that will bring something to the bank, like small business banking. This was a very inspiring presentation today. We are running the project which should improve our position there, because we are #1 on the market as regards the number of the customers, but loan penetration is like 10%, because our systems simply are as they are. So we know that the big data is a big thing which we need to use more. We are playing with that, but I have to admit that at this point of time we are still at the very beginning. That's why one of these presentations we saw today about how to use the data to create a personalized offers for the customers was huge inspiring for me, so we definitely stay in touch.
Interesting. So we said that we need to start from the customer, and one of the lovely sentences during our interviews before this conference we've done with all of our participants was actually be customer obsessed, and I love that sentence. While being a customer obsessed, you know what you're looking for, you're looking to satisfy them, and as soon as you're looking to satisfy them, you're open up to any idea to try to reach that goal. So we understood that we need to be customer obsessed. We do understand that we are very tight with our budgets. One of the interesting information is that in a 2016 statistic says that 2/3 of the CFOs now are including a digital budget, if you will. So that's very encouraging for the digital heads of our industry. But now we know that we need to be customer obsessed. We know that we need to fight for the budgets to make sure that our banks and our systems are following up the trends. But is there anything else in the audience? I would like to open you guys. Is there any question that you would like to drill a little bit more on, or you would like to have more comments on, or we need to drill in the next few minutes we have left? Is there anybody who would like to ask a question? Everybody understands everything? That's so good. So, well, then we will next time need to make a bigger panel here because everybody understands everything perfectly. So the last one is actually creating that digital brand. So you're in the bank since 1983, and there is a trust to that bank, and you know that that bank somewhere might have a branch. Now we are going into a digital branding. So all the incumbent banks are looking at going digital first because they were not born digital. So how do you do your branding? How do you promise to a new customer or existing customer who didn't change his bank account for 2 decades, he actually probably doesn't like to change. So, and then there is a millennial who never walked into the branch and he already has a bank account and a couple of £100,000 mortgage. So how do you create your digital branch? Vladimir?
Did you say digital brand?
Digital brand, sorry.
Brand, okay.
Apologies.
I mean, it sounds like a phrase, but what we say that we do not say digital, but we say innovations are the part of our DNA. So we say, and this is the brand promise to our customers, that we are the most innovative bank on the market. And if you would see our commercials, I mean, they are all about the innovations and these kind of things, because majority of our clients are either corporates or more affluent clients, and they are listening to this message. Yeah.
Great. And Laura, last one from you.
So it's a really good question, but actually I think what you really want to do if you're going to treat digital as a channel and not as a separate business is make sure that your brand is consistent across all environments. If I think about Barclays banking, personal banking, business banking, the last thing I would want to do would be to build a different brand in digital, because really what we're looking for is a really consistent omni-channel experience. You know, everything my team do now is about knitting together digital with offline. So we're working really closely with our call centres, with our branch network, to start to actually work on that. You know, there's always the next big challenge. And to me, actually, the next big challenge is, how do I make sure that when a customer walks into a branch, that the colleague dealing with that customer knows everything that customer has experienced up until that moment?
Yeah,
so to me, it's about consistency, to keep it really brief, not about a new brand.
Absolutely, and I can conclude only because I think everybody's showing like that. So I think it's time to stop talking. So we can conclude that going digital first is actually, what Vladimir said, is teaching your customers that you are giving them what you are promising. So promise, deliver, and delight would be the major conclusion when it comes to going into digital transformation. I would love to ask you all to welcome one of the applause for our panelists for today. We learned a lot. And Tony, I'm sorry for taking your stage a little bit longer, but thanks a lot.
Thank you, Lana.